the mole. You don't have to put an exclamation mark. And I don't think we necessarily need a new gwaith dosbarth. I think we can carry on. So if we write this down, so the mole is a counting unit like a dozen, which is 12, a hat trick in football, which is 3, or a gross, which is possibly not a unit you've heard of before, but it is 144. Okay. The mole is 6.023 times 10 to the 23. I'm going to write the word particles. Okay, so we tend to use it to count particles. It's a lot of particles. Okay, you could, if you wanted, write that out as a conventional number where you'd have to write 20 zeros after the 3. Okay, so it'd be 6, 0, 2, 3, 0, 0, 0, 20 times. It's a big number for counting small things. Okay, it's a big number for counting small things. 1 mole of any element weighs its atomic mass. We know that as the AR. We've seen that a couple of times in that example this morning, in grams. Okay, so for example, 1 mole of sodium weighs 23 grams. So just to illustrate that, if we look at the periodic table, we find that information for sodium. And this is the AR. Okay. So just as a bit of a question for you, what would 3 moles of sulfur weigh? Okay, so what would 3 moles of sulfur weigh? So I'm asking you there to have a quick look at the periodic table and do a quick calculation. So go on, Tempe. Second. 36. Oh, no. I thought you got, what's the mass? The mass of sulfur. Excellent. Okay, so 3 moles of sulfur would weigh 96 grams. Okay, so that the mole allows us to count the amount of sulfur or the amount of any other element present simply by weighing it. We can't count atoms. Okay, they're too small. There's too many of them. What we can do is we can weigh them. We can weigh materials, and if we know the atomic mass or indeed the molecular mass, okay, so if we're talking about compounds rather than elements, we can know how many atoms are present, how many molecules are present. Okay, and I'll leave it that as it is. Okay, so that's a sort of introduction to the idea. We can work with moles, mass, and the molecular mass, okay, or atomic mass, and molecular atomic mass using a formula triangle. Now, don't you just love a formula triangle? What do you mean no?
No.
Yes, you do. Okay. Formula triangle. So are we familiar with what I mean by that? Okay, so in your exam, which unfortunately is what we need to sort of worry about today, you might be asked, you might be given two of these three values, okay, a mole's mass or a molecular or atomic mass, and asked to calculate a third. Okay, you might be asked to work out the third of these three things. And so for that, we do need a formula triangle. Are we all familiar with formula triangle? The fact that Bella said no means that you are familiar with them. I bet you are, Ben. I bet you know what a formula triangle is. Yeah. When I'm going to show you now, okay? So the formula triangle that we need to be aware of looks like this for this topic. Okay, so mass is measured in grams. The amount, so we measure amount in moles, as we've just introduced. That's the new bit of information for today. And then the AR or MR, which we'll call that the mole, the MR or AR, which is in grams per mole. Okay, and it's a formula triangle. Sadly, I've not planned that very well because we need to draw a triangle around it. We need to draw this across here. We need to draw that down there. Okay, so these are three values that are sort of interchangeable mathematically. We can manipulate them. We can do simple calculations with them mathematically. Say again, sorry. It says grams per mole. Okay, for some reason that escapes me right now, when we refer to the mole in calculations, we often what's the word? Knock it down to MOL, not MOLE. Okay, it's because it's to do with moles rather than molecules. Now, Thomas for one said he wasn't sure about formula triangle. Formula triangles are useful for lots of different things, I feel. Okay, there are differences of opinions in this, but you can use them to generate three different equations to solve three different types of problem. If in a question you're asked to calculate the mass of something in a chemistry paper, okay, the likelihood is you will be using this equation. And therefore, in order to use this triangle, we would cover up the word mass. Okay, so if we want a formula that allows us to work out the mass, then we would cover up the word mass and write mass equals, and it's going to equal the number of the amount. Because these two things are sat side by side, we could put a little invisible multiplication sign there. We multiply that by the MR or AR. Of course, I've not laid this out very well. If I had more room, I would have done it underneath. Okay, so if you've got more room, then you might want to lay yours out a little better. Okay, so from this triangle here, we can generate this equation. So the mass of something is the amount times the MR or the AR. Okay, the molecular mass or the atomic mass. Those are the things we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. If you're asked to calculate the amount, then you cover up amount. And in order to calculate the amount, you take the mass and you divide that by the MR or AR, whichever is relevant in your particular question. Okay, because mass is over MR or AR. And then if you're asked to work out the MR or AR, then we do mass divided by amount. I'll just get rid of the grams there because I've not put it anywhere else. Okay, so in a question situation, you need to ask yourself which of these three equations you might need. If you can remember this triangle, then that would help you a great deal. So if we have a look at some example questions, I've got another sheet I'm going to give you shortly. Okay, you'll be pleased to know. Can we move on? Are we all done with that? Yeah. So to save time, rather than me writing it out, I'm going to get the copy of this sheet anyway. I'm going to use the example on the sheet that we've got. Okay, you can see that. So you'll notice that basically all this information does appear on there, and I think it's useful to sort of talk through it as we're going along. So the sort of question you might be asked is, what is the mass of 2.5 moles of chlorine gas? What is the mass of 2.5 moles of chlorine gas? So for that, we covered up the word mass, and we'd use the equation amount times the molar mass, okay, or the AR. The molar mass is the same as AR MR. It's the same thing. And therefore, in order to answer this, we would need to know the amount, okay, which is the 2.5 moles. So that's the amount. And we would need to know the molar mass. Okay, now for this question, the formula for chlorine is Cl2. From your periodic table, you could look up the mass of chlorine, which is, well, it's written here, isn't it? So the molar mass of chlorine, because it's Cl2, is 2 times 35.5. Yeah? So 35.5 is the mass from the periodic table. Well, luckily, you're going to get it in a second in front of you. So it's 2 times 35.5, which is 71. So if we want to know the mass of 2.5 moles of chlorine, then we multiply 2.5 by 71. That is very small, isn't it? And that gives us 177.5 grams. Okay. So if you want to know how many moles there are, then you use the equation where it's mass divided by molar mass, and the question will provide the information you need. And then finally, what is the molar mass of lithium if 31.05 grams contains 4.5 moles? Then we use the molar mass equation, which is mass divided by moles. Okay. Now, I am aware that I've gone through this extremely quickly. Normally, I'd like to take more time over this, but I just want to make sure that you've got at least a fighting chance of answering the one question that might appear next week on your test. Okay, so don't panic. We will look at this again, probably now. Next week is, how many weeks have we got left before half term? 2. And then we're not here on the Friday. You're not here on the Friday. I am. So next week will actually be our last lesson this half term, won't it? So after half term, we will come back and look at this with more time and more sort of care, okay? Because I am conscious of the fact that I am rushing this at the moment, but I do want to give you these question sheets to see whether you can use this triangle to answer them, okay? So I'm going to come around with those now. I'll just stop the recording.